Hello, this is Brian Foster, and today we are talking about another chapter in The Wander in the Spirit Land by the Spirit Franchezzo. I know many people have been enjoying this whole series. We're now on chapter 27. Welcome on our return. So, very quickly, Franchezzo was a spirit. He was in the physical location, I should say. He's very educated. He was quite well known. He was kind of a severe person, and then he didn't treat women very nicely. But then he met the love of his life, and then his life. I don't know how far, but it was soon after he died, and he went down into the lower zones, almost like down to purgatory. But she kept trying to reach out to him from talking to mediums, and it gave him the incentive to let go of his quest for revenge and the lower primitive emotions. So he went through all this, became a member of the Brotherhood. He just finished going through as part of that team of spirits that living in an outpost in heaven, going down back into a purgatory. We call it dark abyss. He called it hell. But of course, remember, there is no eternal punishment according to Spiritism. You're only down there in that unpleasant place until you change your attitude. So now he's successful in finishing that, and he's going back home. So let's bring up this. So I know that people like to read along. Now, let me bring this up here. So this is Through the Gates of Gold. This is part 4, chapter 27. On our return to the land of Dawn, we met with the right royal welcome from our brotherhood, and a festival was given in our honor. Now, this is something I see many times in Spiritist literature. Is they really believe in celebrating success, and it's you'll see it's the whole way of what they motivate people, and they want people to go and do the work in order for them to rise up from one spiritual level to another spiritual level, because there are multiple levels in heaven. It's all about positive reinforcement. And it's also, they'll take a person on level 1 or level 2 of heaven and take them to 3 or 4 and say, look, this is what's waiting for you. And then you can decide for yourself how much work you wish to do, because it is work. It's education, and it's work on your spirituality, your love and your kindness and your love of service. Those are all work. So it is, it's not something like, oh, I just want to go there. No, you have to earn that right. But to earn that right, it takes effort. Now carry on. On entering our own little rooms, each of us found a new robe awaiting him. It was of a very light gray, almost white color, and the border, girdle, and device of our order, an anchor and a star upon the left sleeve, were in deep golden yellow. So you can tell that he's not in really one of the higher levels of heaven, because otherwise his mind would create that robe. Of course, now here they're still giving it to him, and it's very great because now it has something to be proud of. And you'll see that this is again completely agreed upon in Spiritist writings, is that they will wear different orders, will wear different colors of robe and have different stones of color. And in fact, some spirits say you can kind of tell what order they work for and where they are by their color and the stones that they have. Even Jesus has a certain robe and some stones that he has that are different than other people. Oh, in fact, here he says, I greatly prize this new dress because in the spirit world, the dress symbolizes the state of the advancement of the spirit and is esteemed as showing what each one has attained. What I prized even more than the new dress, however, was a most beautiful wreath of pure white spirit roses, which I had found clustered around and framed the magic picture of my beloved. The woman has really been a wonderful lady to him. A frame that never withered, never faded, and whose fragrance was wafted to me as I reposed on the snow-white couch and gazed out upon those peaceful hills behind which there shone the dawning day. And that's another something I think people should realize about the spirit world. There is no decay. He thinks of those beautiful white spirit roses that were gifted to him by his wonderful partner, and she's still in the physical world. Now, if he at some point in time stopped thinking about those spirit roses, they would just merely disappear. They wouldn't, the petals wouldn't drop. They wouldn't look, like they were rotten or anything like that. They would just disappear. Nothing decays. There's no rust, none of that. Once you create something that lasts as long as you want it to, or unless a higher spirit says, can I use that for something else? I'll carry on. I was aroused from my reverie by a friend who came to summon me to the festival. And on entering the great hall, I found my father and some friends of my wanderings awaiting me. We greeted one another with much emotion after we had enjoyed a banquet similar to the one I described on my first entrance to this sphere. We all assembled at the lower end of the hall before a large curtain of gray and gold which completely covered the walls. While we waited in expectation of what we were to see, a soft strain of music floated toward us as though borne upon some passing breeze. This grew stronger, fuller, more distinct, till a solemn, majestic measure, like the march of an army, fell upon our ears. Not a march of triumph or rejoicing, but one of such might be played by an army of giants, mourning over a dead comrade. So grand, so full of pathos was the strain. Now, music, it's important to know that music in this spirit world doesn't just like affect your ears. It affects your whole body. It affects our mood here too, but music really is part and parcel. It gives you, it's like a calming effect, even stronger than in the physical world. Music is used a lot in the spirit world. In fact, actually, music will actually notify people when some meetings take place and kind of embed in them exactly what time and where it is, but it's not like a loudspeaker saying, here's the time. It will just embed these messages. That's how subtle and efficient the spirit world is. And when you think the spirit world is actually this logical construct made up of this very complex logic, it all makes sense. I'll carry on. Then the curtain gilded apart and showed us a huge mirror of black polished marble. And then the music changed to another measure, still solemn, still grand, but with somewhat of discordance in its tones. It wavered to and became uneven in the measure of its time, as though halting in uncertain step. Yes, so as someone said, you not only hear it, but feel it. I don't know. So yes, exactly. You feel it, and it will affect your mood. It's a wonderful thing. Okay, let me carry on. It wavered too and became uneven as measure of time, as though halting with uncertain steps and stumbling and hesitating. Then the air around us darkened till we could scarce see each other's faces. Slowly the light faded, and the last we could see was the black polished surface of the gigantic mirror, and in it I saw reflected the figures of two members of our expedition. They moved and spoke, and the scenery around them grew distinct, and as such I had seen in the infernal we had left. The weird music stirred my soul into its innermost core, and looking upon the drama being enacted before my eyes, I forgot where I was. I forgot everything, and there seemed to be wandering once more in the dark depths of hell. And again, this is a show of the spirit world where they'll show a movie, but then you will actually feel like you're in this 3D area. You actually feel like you're part of that movie, and it's just amazing. I mean, just imagine leaving this earth, going up to heaven, going to like a library, and then reliving historical moments and actually being there and not only seeing what's happening, what people are saying, but actually knowing what everyone in wherever you are, right? Like Napoleon in the Battle of Waterloo, what he was thinking, and then going over and seeing and seeing what the British were thinking or the Germans were thinking as they were marching towards the sound of the battle. So I mean, it must be very interesting. Okay, I'll carry on. Picture melted into picture till we had been shown the varied experiences of each of our bank, from the lowest member to our leader himself. The last scene showing the whole company assembled upon the hill, listening to the farewell discourse of our commander. And like the chorus in a Greek tragedy, the wild music seemed to accompany and explain it all, varying with every variation in the dramas, now sad in sorrow, now full of repose or triumph, and again wailing, sobbing, shrieking, or changing into a murmuring lullaby as some poor rescued soul sank to rest at last, then again rising into the wild notes of clamor, fierce cries of battle, hoarse curses and precautions, now surging in wild waves of tumultuous melody, then dying away amidst discordant broken notes. At last, the final scene was enacted. It sank into a soft plaintive air of the most exquisite sweetness, and died away note by note. As it ceased, the darkness vanished. The curtains glided over the black mirror, and we all turned with a sigh of relief and thankfulness to congratulate each other that our wanderings in the dark land were past. So, I mean, isn't it wonderful? So, again, it shows that the spirit world records everything, not just here on earth. You know, and as we're growing up, we're taught, keep your mouth shut. That way you don't appear stupid, right? And, you know, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything. But that's why we're here, to really change and rewire our brain, is to not just say, to learn to filter out and not say bad things, but not even to think bad things. That is, you know, stop malicious gossip, stop, you know, as I used to walk to work, and before I discovered Spiritism and really started internalizing it, I'd look at these bums on the, you know, as I call them, not anymore, but on the street line, I go, oh, you're useless, right? Now I go, oh, you poor guy, you made some bad choices on your trial. I hope you get better. And so you really try and not wish anyone ill, and you feel sorry for them. That doesn't mean they can't be arrested, right? Or you're a pushover. No, it doesn't mean that. But you just understand where they are in the spiritual hierarchy. I'll carry on. I asked my father how this effect had been produced. Was it an illusion or what? My son, he answered, what you have seen is an application of scientific knowledge, nothing more. The mirror has been prepared that it receives and reflects the images thrown upon it from a series of sheets of thin metal, or rather what is the spiritual counterpart of earthly metal. These sheets of metal have been highly sensitized, so they're able to receive and retain these pictures, somewhat in the fashion of a phonograph, as you saw in the Earth Life, receives and retains the sound waves. When you were wandering in these dark spheres, you were put in magnetic communication with this instrument, and adventures of each were transferred to one of these sensitive sheets, while the emotions of every one of you caused the sound waves in the spheres of music and literature to vibrate in corresponding tones of sympathy. So that is how someone would explain it at the beginning of the 20th century, end of the 19th century. You know, the sensitized photograph. It's kind of your sensitive sheets, kind of like a photographic sheets, right? But how would we explain it? Well, we explain it is that as these people were on their mission, every thought, deed, vision that they saw, thoughts of their opponents or people they're trying to help was absolutely recorded and stored in the universal huge database, the universal database. And then through some sort of algorithm or some sort of manipulation by other spirits, or an algorithm that's already been made to create these things, probably a combination of both. These were all these data, which was either thoughts, emotions, pictures, were assembled into a story, right? An illustrative story of the whole group. So when you think of that, when you think that everyone on earth and everyone in the spirit world, everything is always recorded all the time, so you can forget your privacy. When you know that, and then someone is able to create this wonderful presentation for the group so they can feel good about themselves, that shows you the complexity of the spirit world. And I'll carry on. When you were wandering in those dark spheres, you were put in magnetic communication with this instrument, and the adventures of each were transferred to one of these sensitive sheets, Well, the emotions of every one of you cause the sound waves, the spheres of music and literature to vibrate in corresponding tones of sympathy. I think I read that already. And of course, I think that was how they interpreted it. I think it was really data, and then uh, interpreted, or at least sent to those sensitive sheets, which is, to us, you call it like a screen or CRT, whatever you like to call it, LED screen. He goes, you belong to the spheres of art, music, and literature, and therefore you're able to see and feel and understand the vibrations of these spheres. In the spirit world, all emotions, speeches, or events reproduce themselves in objective forms and become, for those in harmony with them, either pictures, melodies, or spoken narratives. The spirit world is created by the thoughts and actions of the soul, and therefore every act or thought forms its spiritually material counterpart. In this sphere, you'll find many things not yet known to men on earth, many curious inventions, which will in time be transmitted to earth and closed there in material form. But see, you are about to receive the palm branch, which is given to each of you as a reward of your victory. So let's talk about some of the things he's saying there. Emotions, speeches, or events reproduce themselves in objective forms, meaning they are recorded. That means the spirit world, the physical world is an objective world. The wall is a wall, whatever it is, the table's a table, your head's solid. The spirit world is a subjective world, meaning thought is action. Now, his father said in objective form, meaning it recorded what happened. It didn't record what you wanted to happen. It recorded what happened. And therefore, it was stored in some database. Now, he also said, in this sphere, you'll find many things not yet known to men on earth. Now, the great Brazilian medium, Chico Xavier, said that the lower levels of heaven is about 50 to 100 years in advance technologically than the earth. And therefore, the guys who invented the cell phone, Elon Musk with Tesla, those things were invented by inspiration. Yes, these people are, they're geniuses, but a lot of times they're geniuses because they pick up inspiration from higher spirits. And they've actually seen what they've invented in the spirit world. And when people first see them, they go, yes, that's what I want, because their instinct says they've used it. G. Vallone's mother talked about some sort of device where you could record what you're doing. And of course, she didn't say, this was like around 1910. She didn't say typewriter. So it's probably some sort of terminal. Chico Xavier's mother talked about a small communication device. This was in, I think, the 1930s. That was like a cell phone. So you see now, of course, you can say, well, why would they need that? Because they communicate by thought. Well, the lower levels of heaven, they don't really have that capability yet. They're starting to learn. So a lot of people, when you're in the lower level of heaven, are given these devices. So this is another. So again, it shows you the complexity and the genius of the spirit world. They are preparing us for what comes through, and they're always guiding us. They're always kind of moving culture where they want it to be. It's very subtle, but it's there. And I know people think, just everything is chaotic, and we haven't improved, and this is a horrible life we lead. And I understand what you're saying, but no, it feels that way in our small point in time. And in fact, when I talk about how we are guided, I want to say this is how we are guided by spirits, book 3 of Spiritism. And so if you really want to know how we're guided individually and how whole nations and cultures are guided, I would recommend this book. And my other 2 books are Heaven and Below, Book 1, and Spirits and Spirit Universe. But this will really tell you how we are guided. Okay, let me get back to so you can read this. Okay, let me get where I was at. At this moment, the large doors of the hall were once more thrown open, and our Grand Master entered, followed by the same train of handsome youths I'd seen before, only this time each carried a branch of palm instead of a wreath of laurel. When the Grand Master had seated himself under his canopy of state, we were each summoned to his presence to receive our branch of palm, and when we had all done so, returned to our places again. A most joyous hymn of victory was sung by everyone. our palm branches waving in time to the music, and our glad voices filling the air with triumphant harmony. Now, when I think of that, I always think about the last scene in Star Wars, right, where they were all there and they had the triumph thing. So, I mean, it's also familiar. I now enjoyed a long, quiet season of rest, which resembled that of half waking, half sleeping state, when the mind is too much in repose to think, and yet retains full consciousness of all its surroundings. From this state, which lasted some weeks, I rose completely recovered from the effect of my wanderings in the dark sphere. So on this paragraph, you can see that Franchezzo had a lot to process. A higher spirit would have recovered faster. And in fact, they understand, and we're told by spirits that coming to the earth, and this lets, as an example, coming to the physical plane, is exhausting. Yes, these spirits are powerful, and they have a lot of energy, but it's exhausting for anyone coming to this plane because there's so much negativity. And so there are places like sanatoriums where they'll give you music therapy, water therapy that make you relax, because it is exhausting coming and being surrounded by negativity. And of course, he was in real negativity because he was in the lower zones and, in hell, as he called it. But even the spirits coming to earth to help us, it is not an easy task. It takes great sacrifice to do that. And that's why we should thank our guardian angels and thank the spirits that help us, because they are there. Now, guardian angels don't have to be next to us all the time. They can come when they think something exciting is going to happen or major is going to happen, but it's not an easy thing. Okay. And my first thought was to visit my beloved and see if she could see me and be conscious of my improved appearance. And of course, as he's saying, as you rise up the spirit world, your outer self really is a function of your inner self, unlike here in physical, where you can be a wonderful, handsome, beautiful person, and yet inside you're not very nice. It doesn't happen there. I shall not, however, dwell upon our interview, for its joy was for ourselves alone. I only seek to show that death does not of necessity either end our affection for those we have left or shut us out from sharing with them our joys and sorrows. And he's absolutely right. And especially if you think about him and the love of his life. And now you think they're going to be, I don't know how old she is. He's in the spirit world. Let's say she's 30. Let's say she lasts till she's 8, 50 years. Well, both of them are immortal souls. They'll live for eternity. So 50, eternity divided, 50 divided by eternity is a fraction of nothing, right? So it's not long and it goes quickly. So don't lose heart. Especially for those out there who feel like I don't have a soulmate or never find my soulmate, that could be in the spirit world waiting for you. And believe me, you're here going through these trials and tribulations for a good reason. There's always an educational reason, and it won't last forever. Okay, I'll carry on. I found that I was now much more able to communicate with her through her own mediumistic powers, so that we did not need any third person to intervene and help us. And thus were my labors lightened and cheered by her sweet affection and her conscious recognition of my presence and of my continued existence. And of course, it may not just have been her own mediumistic powers. The fact that since she was a pretty advanced spirit anyway, a wonderful person, he is becoming more to her spiritual level, and thus in like the law of affinity states, thus that they were able to communicate better, just like any mediums out there. A medium of kind of a medium on earth, a physical medium of not much spirituality, and even people who are pretty rough and ready will have mediumistic ability, but they won't have any spiritual advancement. They will talk to spirits on their level, not higher spirits. I'll carry on. My work at this time was once more upon the earth plane, and in those cities of counterparts I had seen in hell. I had to labor among those mortals and spirits who thronged them and impressed their minds with a sense of what I had seen in that dark sphere below. I knew I could only make them dimly conscious of it, only arouse a little their dormant sense of fear of the future retribution for their present misdeeds. But even that was something and would help to deter some from to a complete abandonment of themselves to selfish pleasure. Moreover, amongst the spirits who were earthbound in those cities, I found many whom I could assist with the knowledge and strength which I had gained in my journey. So again, that's something we should listen to our conscience, listen to our inspiration. Filter everything that thought becomes in your mind through your conscience to make sure that it is a worthy thought and it doesn't make you uh, kind of go past the set of divine laws where you could hurt yourself or hurt someone else. And so think, because many thoughts of your own are your own, but then there's a lot of thoughts that are inspiration from good spirits and ignorant spirits. That's why you must filter everything. Some can be detrimental to you, detrimental to your path to future spiritual ascendance. There there ever is, and ever must be ample work for those upon the earth plane. For multitudinous are as are the workers there. More are always being wanted, since men are passing over from earth life every hour and every minute, who need all the help that can be given them. Thus passed some months for me, and then I began once more to feel the old restless longing to rise higher myself, to attain more than I had yet done, to approach near to that sphere to which my beloved one would pass when her earthly life was ended. So now he just says what I had said before. She was of a higher spiritual level than he was, and he knew that. So it was very excellent. And by attaining which I could alone hope to be united to her in the spirit world. I used to at this time be tormented with a constant fear lest my darling should pass from the earth before I had risen to her spiritual level, and thus I should again be parted from her. This fear it was which had ever urged me on to fresh efforts, fresh conquest over myself, and now made me dissatisfied even with the progress I had made. I knew that I'd overcome much. I'd struggled hard to improve, and I had risen wonderfully fast. Yet in spite of all, I was still tormented by the jealous and suspicious feelings which my disposition in my earthly experience had gathered about me. There were even times when I began to doubt the constancy of my beloved herself, in spite of all the many proofs of her love which she had given me, natural human emotion. I would fear lest while I was away from her, someone yet in the flesh should after all win her love from me. And thus I was in danger of becoming earthbound by reason of my unworthy desire to watch her continually. So think about that, and think about how possessive some men and women are of their significant other. And that's where you really learn is we don't possess each other. We help each other on the spiritual ladder. And when someone needs to do something that you don't want, it's usually a good learning experience. You can give them your best advice, but you can't force anyone to do something. That's what the spirit world does. The spirit world doesn't force us to learn, doesn't force us to be good people. We have to go through these trials and tribulations for us to then transform our inner character so that we know that, oh, this is what I want, right? Motivation comes from within. Your character and your personality change isn't molded from above. This is the mistake so many people make of these governments that make laws and force people. Oh, we're going to make everyone do this, right? All they do is find ways around it. You have to give people the opportunity, and some won't take it, not to believe what you think is good is good. They have to learn the more difficult way. And actually, a lot of times that is good because then it reinforces internally what really is good or not. You cannot impose people to obey and be good, because the moment that imposition is gone, they'll revert back to where they were. And that's again what I talk about when people say, well, how come God doesn't expose himself and say, here I am? Because my counter argument to that is that if Jesus came, or God came and said, look, all these things, and this is what happens when you're bad, people would go, oh, that'd be good. And then 3 months afterwards, when they hadn't come again, they go, that must have been a mass illusion. And they'd be right back where they were. It didn't affect the change. And if you want to know why there's chaos and horrible things on earth, is because we have free will to affect the change at our own speed. So humans go and they do terrible things. And then they do terrible things. And in their next life, they pay for those terrible things. And they finally learn to get better and better in the change their character and their personality. Okay. In fact, he says it here. And how slowly, as best I was, okay, you who think a spirit has changed all his thoughts and desires at the moment of dissolution, how little you understand the conditions of that other life beyond the grave, and how slowly, how very slowly, we change the habits of thoughts we have cultivated in our earthly lives, or how long they cling to us in the spiritual state. That's because your thoughts are your thoughts. If you're a good person and you transfer over, you're still a good person. If you're a criminal and a pickpocket, you're still a criminal and a pickpocket when you transfer over. You do not become an angel of goodness. You are who you are, which is good. I mean, and I used to worry about when I was younger, like, what if I was shot in the head? Would I just be like an idiot? Right? No, that's just your physical brain. Oh, I have a question. It would be nice for God to let us know that he's there like a parent, like there's a child, know that they are comforted. Well, I understand what you're saying, but that's something that it's really up to us to discover for ourselves. Everyone has different ways, and this goes with what Spiritism says, is they don't want faith based upon me telling you, oh, Aurora X, you have to believe in God, and you have to be a good person because it's going to help you, and you're going to do that because I said so, right? No, it's all up to you. You will find God in your own way, and you'll find your spirituality in your own way, and that's part of the test on earth, is for you to be able to find that. I know it's not easy, and you're right. It would be nice. I totally agree with that. It would be nice to know, but this exactly what you said is going to be there when we are at a planet of regeneration. When we're a planet of atonement, we're moving to a planet of regeneration. Then we'll more easily communicate to the spirit world, and we'll know they're there all the time. But right now, we're going through this basic camp, right? Boot camp, where we have to figure that out ourselves. And it's a tough assignment. So it's a tough assignment. I'm not going to lie to you, but what it does is it builds a foundation of faith upon concrete, not upon sand. I hope that answers your question. That's an excellent question, and I certainly sympathize with that, and I think that every so often myself too. Where was I? Oh. I was then in character much what I'd been on earth, only a little better, only learning by degrees where my ideas had been wrong and full of prejudice. A lesson we may go on learning through many spheres higher than any I had attained to. Even while I doubted and feared, I was ashamed of my doubts and knew how unjust they were, yet I could not free myself from them. The experiences of my earth life had taught me suspicion and distrust, and the ghosts of the earth life were not so easily laid. Now, this is so true, and you think, and here, I mean, this is something I had to go through too. Is I still have my doubts, and I still worry what's going to happen to this and what's going to happen to that. But the more you study Spiritism, and the more you internalize it, the more you feel comfortable, and then you go through each day, and that really you're not that you have to be passive, right? You still need to strive, but you understand that the spirit world has this blueprint for you that you're going to go through, and that things will happen to you that are all planned out, and you just got to look at the signs and signals and kind of lose some of that anxiety. Let's say you just lost a bunch of money. You just have to know, well, somehow I'm going to make it, and I'll just keep trying my hardest, and I'll learn to live without that extra money. It's happened to me quite a few times, and I'll just have to learn to live with less. And that was all part of a lesson by the spirit world. So it makes you less stressful. And therefore, when you think, oh, uh, let's say for Franchezzo, oh, she's going to meet someone else. Well, if she meets someone else, she meets someone else. That was planned by the spirit world. And it was probably part of the plan for Franchezzo to learn that even if she met someone else, he should still love her, that she's still a precious person. And that was what was good for her at the time, because otherwise the spirit world would have said, no, that's not going to be her blueprint. So he needs to have faith in the plan for us by the spirit realm. And that's how you kind of free yourself of this nervousness and this stress and this anxiety. Okay, let me carry on. It was while I was in the state of self-torment that Anzarinza man came to me, told me how I might free myself from these haunting shadows of the past. Well, let's see. There is, said he, a land not far from here called the land of remorse. Were you to visit it, the journey would be of much service to you, for once its hills and valleys were passed and its difficulties overcome, the true nature of your earthly life and its mistakes would be clearly realized and prove a great means of progression for your soul. Such a journey will indeed be full of much bitterness and sorrow, for you will see displayed in all their nakedness the actions of your past, actions which you have already in part atoned for, but do not yet see as the eyes of the higher spiritual intelligences see them. Few who come over from earth life fully realize the true motives which prompted their actions. Many indeed go on for years, some even for centuries before this knowledge comes to them. They excuse and justify their own consciousness, their misdeeds. We all do that. That's very true. And such a land as this I speak of is very useful for enlightening them. The journey must, however, be undertaken voluntarily, and it will then shorten by years the pathway of progression. In that land, men's lives are stored up as pictures, which, mirrored in the wondrous spiritual atmosphere, reflect for them the reasons of many failures. Oh, I love to go there. And show the subtle causes at work in their own hearts, which have shaped the lives of each. It would be a severe and keen self-examination through which you would pass, a bitter experience of your own nature, your own self. But though bitter, it is a salutary medicine, and would go far to heal your soul of those maladies of the earth life, which like a miasma hang about it still. Arisman took me to one of the top of those dim and distant hills, which I could see from the window of my little room, and leading to me where we looked down across a wide plain bounded by another range of hills far away. On the other side of those farther hills lies this wondrous land of which I speak, a land through which most spirits pass, whose lives have been such as to call for great sorrow and remorse. Those whose errors have been mostly merely trivial, daily weaknesses such as are common to all mankind, do not pass through it. There are other means whereby they may be enlightened as to the source of their mistakes. This land is more particularly useful to such as yourself, of strong powers and strong will, who will recognize readily and admit freely wherein you have done wrong, and in doing so arise to better things. Like a strong tonic, the circle of the sphere would be too much for some weak erring spirits, who would only be crushed and overwhelmed and disheartened by the too rapid and vivid realization of all their sins. Such spirits must be taught slowly, step by step, a little at a time, while you who are strong of heart and full of courage will but rise the more rapidly the sooner you see and recognize the nature of those fetters which have bound your soul. And this is so true. And spirits have done this in spiritualist literature all around. People who, even they talk about spirits of strong will and who are able to analyze themselves severely and in the the bright light of reality, like, oh, I can't believe I did that. I made a big mistake. Instead of rationalizing away, like, oh, it's not my fault, someone else's fault. And actually, as you become a spiritist, you understand that everything was caused by you in some manner or other. And so you don't really say, oh, that person made this, that person's fault. No, you were put in that situation of what you've done in the past. That person was merely an actor in a play following a script to teach you a lesson. And so if you can really, and then, like when I used to go to work, I'm retired now, but, and then And you know how when you're in work, the great, you know, the great amusement is having malicious gossip about other people. And as I became a spiritist, I tried to get away from that, not take part in those discussions. Every so often, I I would, and it was like, oh, I am so stupid. It'd be another failure for me, and but that's good because then I it would reinforce that I had to keep working. And let me tell everybody, you're on Earth not just to appear to be a better person. That's important. But you're on Earth to rewire your brain. You know how hard that is? That's not something you're going to do in a week. Not something like you're going to decide, like, I'm not going to lie anymore. I'm going to be a better person. Well, great. But in those who have even done that, you know how hard it was to stop lying even about little things? And this is even this times by an exponential factor. It is hard to not think ill of people on a daily or hourly basis. Therefore, and then also it's hard not to think anxious about yourself and your future. All of this stuff takes a lot of time. This is why I say learn and study about spiritism, because what it does, it allows you to rise above and look at yourself from the 10,000-foot level and look at yourself like, oh, I'm going through a learning experience. I will learn and I'll get better. It's not the end of the world. No matter what happens, it's not the end of the world because I'm an immortal soul. I cannot die. I'm just learning. Okay. Then he said, I'll carry on. And will it take me long to accomplish this journey? And he answered, no, it will last but a short time, 2 or 3 weeks of earth time. For behold, as I shadow it forth to you, I see following it fast the image of your returning spirit, showing that the two events are not separated by a wide interval. Now, this is really interesting. And I'll read it and I'll tell you why. In the spirit world, where time is not reckoned by days or weeks or counted by hours, we judge how long an event will take to accomplish, or when an occurrence will happen, by seeing how near or far away they appear, and also by observing whether the shadow cast by the coming event touches the earth or is yet distant from it. We then try to judge as nearly possible of what will be its corresponding time as measured by earthly standards. Even the wisest of us may not always be able to do this with perfect correctness. Therefore, it is well for those who communicate with friends on earth not to give an exact date for unforeseen events, since many things may intervene to delay it and thus make the date incorrect. An event may be shown very near, yet instead of continuing to travel to the mortal at the same speed, it may be delayed or held in suspense, and sometimes even turned aside altogether by a stronger power than the one which had set it in motion. There is so much in this paragraph. So the spirit world, there's no time. But so, and yet when you see objects, you see past, present, and you'll see the future of that object. But the future of the object is the most probable future. And what he is saying, he looked at what Franchezzo was doing, and he looked at what it was in relation to the earth. And then he's saying that, yeah, it looks like it shouldn't take too long, but things could change. As an example, then he goes, even when we think something's going to happen on a certain date, there could be a higher power that changes it. There is this, and in one of the Andre Luis books, he was sent on a mission to help this lady leave the earth because she's a very great lady. And so she was going to be gone on a certain date. Well, her kind of adopted grandson or kind of an orphan that was there, they treated him like a son. Andre Luis said that, nope, we've changed the date. We're going to let her live for another 3 months. And he goes, well, why? And he goes, well, her son, who is going to end up marrying a granddaughter of hers, her daughter is pregnant right now. And he said, and because he was a mature spirit, he went and talked to the higher spirits, because he's probably pretty high spirit himself, and said, no, you better not have the grandmother die because it could affect the pregnancy. And they go, yeah, you're right. So we'll give her another 3 months. And so Andre Luis said, no, keep her alive for 3 more months. We'll extend the date of when she was going to leave the earth. This is how these things work. This is how complicated it is. Things are dynamic. So our lives aren't written in stone. We can change them by our actions and modify them. But this is how complicated things are. So, and then the other thing I want to make sure you understand is that when when I don't know if people who listen to this, they talk to spirits or they talk to mediums, and they think, well, why don't you know the date? What's wrong with you? Now he's telling you why, because it's an entirely different uh, way of looking at things. It's like Socrates, um, um, the analogy of the cave, where you go through and the people are feathered to the wall, feathered to the ground, and all they see is two-dimensional objects. One of them escapes, goes into the world where he sees three dimensions, goes back and tells everyone in the cave that, yeah, there's three dimensions, and they kill him because they can't believe that that's bullshit, right? There's no way. I shouldn't say that word. I apologize for that. So that is that is the way it is. Things are completely different, and when you have dreams, that's why your dreams are full of kind of fuzziness and strange symbology, is because you're trying to interpret this four-dimensional world with our three-dimensional. The question is, when we physically pass, we're never who we were before, or are we always same consciousness in another form? Yes, you don't transform. When you die, you are who you are. But, and in fact, many people will die and think they're not dead because they still have the paraspiritual body, and you go, like, well, I'm still here. Uh, I'm not dead. And then they'll go to their home and they don't understand why people listen to them. It's like that great movie, I think it was Sixth Sense, where you kept talking to people and no one would listen. So you are who you were before. Now, as you stay longer in the spirit world and you are ready for it, you'll be allowed to remember more and more of your past lives. And it may take a time, because once you understand your past lives and what a rotten person you've been in the past, it's pretty shocking. So they may hide that from you for quite a while. So yes, you are immortal, and then in your form, as you get more advanced in the spirit world, your thoughts can influence your form. So as they say in the spirit world, if you die when you're old, you become younger. If you die when you're really young, you become older. You become in either mid-20s or 30s or 40s, however you felt you want to look. Your hair becomes full, right? I won't be partly bald, right? I won't be so fat, all that type of stuff. I won't need glasses. So those things that you will change over time, right? As you wish you will look like as you believe you should look. But you'll never lose who you are. Okay. So anyway, that gives you the complexity of someone trying to interpret perfect dates. That's just not a simple thing. In fact, I have an article on that. I think I even have a video on that. I'll carry on. I thanked my guide for his advice, and we parted. I was so very eager to progress that a very short time after this conversation saw me setting forth upon my journey. Oh, before I forget, Orbital X is on Mondays at around 5 p.m. Eastern. I have a question and answer. I love question and answers anytime, but also if you want to ask more and concentrate on that, on Mondays, I now have live streams where I answer questions. So please hit the bell, subscribe, and hit the bell. So on Mondays, it's all Q&A. Anything you want to know, not that I can answer it correctly, but I can try. Okay, let me carry on. I found my progress not so rapid had been the case in my previous travels through the spirit land, for now I had taken upon me the full burden of my past sins. And like the load carried by the pilgrim Christian, it almost weighed me down to the earth, making my movements very slow and laborious. Like a pilgrim, I was habited in a coarse gray robe. My feet were bare and my head uncovered. For in the spirit world, the condition of your mind forms your clothing. There you go. He's got that. And its surroundings. And my feelings then were as though I wore sackcloth and had put dust and ashes upon my head. So again, he's saying, What he's thinking is now affecting even the clothes he's wearing. And by the way, you can clean them by your mind. You don't have to put them in the washing machine. When I last crossed those dim, far-off hills, there lay before me a wide, sandy plain, a great desert in which I saw the barren sands of my earthly life lie scattered. No tree, no shrub, no green thing was there for anywhere for the eye to rest upon. No water of refreshment to sparkle before us like hopes of happiness. There is no shade for our weary limbs should we seek for repose. The lives of those who cross this plain in search of the rest beyond have been barren of true, pure, unselfish affection, and that self-denial which alone can make the desert to bloom like the rose and sweet waters of refreshment to spring up around their paths. I descended to this dreary waste of sand and took a narrow path which seemed to lead to the hills on the other side. The load I carried now became almost intolerable to me, and I longed to lay it down, but in vain. I could not for one moment detach it. The hot sand seemed to blister my feet as I walked, and each step was so labored as to be most painful. As I passed slowly on, there rose before me pictures of my past, and all of those whom I had known. These pictures seemed to be just in front of me and to float in the atmosphere like those mirages seen by earthly travelers through the desert. Like dissolving views, they appeared to melt into one another and give place to fresh scenes. Through them all there moved the friends or strangers whom I met and known, and the long-forgotten unkind thoughts and words which I had spoken to them rose up in accusing array before me. The tears I had made others shed, the cruel words, sharper and harder to bear than any blow, with which I had wounded the feelings of those around me. A thousand hard, unworthy thoughts and selfish actions on my past, long thrust aside and forgotten or excused, all rose up once more before me, picture after picture, till at last I was so overwhelmed to see what an array of them there was, that I broke down, casting my pride to the winds. I bowed myself in the dust and wept bitter tears of shame and sorrow. And where my tears fell on the hot, dry sand, there sprang up around me little flowers like white stars, each little waxy blossom bearing in its heart a drop of dew. So the place I had sunk down upon in such sorrow had become a little oasis of beauty in that weary desert. So I'll stop there, and we'll carry on next week at the same time. But you can see this whole desert, this trek, was a contrived experience by the spirit world to help people to go through this. They could have done it in a chair, but no, they made it all, they made it interactive. They made it so you felt like you were really doing something. There was this wonderful NDE by a person that it was a lot like this, and it was had an NDE. He said for I can't remember. I have it's in my book. The Spirit World Talks to Us. He had NDE for like 7 or 8 minutes, and yet in his mind, he was in the spirit world for over 2,000 years. And he was in this place alone. And he said, okay, once a year, you're going to have another seed. And then as you get the seed, another plant's going to be created. And then you're going to create this path up the hill. And so he created this like stone path up the hill. Year by year went by, and he made this kind of barren place into this beautiful garden and parkland. And then the spirit came, and then all of a sudden, when he had the path done, he hadn't walked the path yet, and there was like a temple appeared at the top of the hill. Then he was brought back down to the bottom of the hill, and the spirit said, in his mind, he said, now walk up the path. And so then he started walking up the path, and each step became more painful and painful as he thought of all the past things, just like Franchezzo, all the past wrongs he had done, the past ways of thinking, his actions. And he goes, I can't make it. And he just put one foot after the other. And he finally almost got to the end. He goes, I can't do it. It's too painful. And the spirit in his mind says, yes, you can make it. You can make it. And finally, he made it. And he went to the temple, and there was the spirit waiting for him and tell him, okay, now you're ready to go back to earth. He was never the same after that. You'll hear the same thing in spirits in the lower zone or the dark abyss or purgatory. And as they are saying, okay, now you can rise up, you need to walk up and go to outposts and get closer to heaven. And they will just go through this pain as they walk up and become, as you know, in the spirit form, as they walk up to a higher level. Because as they walk up, the brighter light like, burns away the wrongs they have done, and they remember. They start remembering as they go higher and higher in heaven. They remember, they relive the not good things that they've done. And that is, I mean, so powerful. So I think that is important to understand. So, and the other thing is what they said is that when we go to heaven, we are our own worst judge. We are the ones that's going to like say, oh, I can't believe I did that. Where the other spirits around us will say, nah, it wasn't that bad. You know, you'll get over that. So know full well that that's why we're here. We're here to rip out those primitive emotions and replace those with advanced, you know, emotions of love, charity, fraternity, and honesty, and to help our fellow travelers on earth. You know, not to be perfect. No one expects you to be perfect. They expect you, they just want you to try and to try harder. And I would say that do that with studying. So my personal advice, and just you do however you want to do it, because I'm sure you know best how you learn, is what I'd recommend is I would say that it would be a good idea to go to my site and download from my site, nwspiritism.com. Download a PDF if you want. You know, it's also on Kindle, paperback, and Audible, but you can do it for free. Spiritism 101, the Third Revelation. It's like under 100 pages. And it's kind of a survey of what Spiritism is. And then I would, if you wish, again, this book is in PDF. All of Allan Kardec's books are in PDF. You can read the Spirit's book. It's 1,019 questions. He codified the Spirit's book from having these questions given to multiple mediums, all under the management of the Spirit of Truth, as promised by Jesus. And this really gives you, it's like there's the first revelation. They call it Spiritism, the third revelation. First revelation is from Moses, which was kind of more of a directive. The second revelation is from Jesus. Christ came to earth and said, hey, we need to start treating each other better. Might does not equal right. And the third revelation is, okay, you're more mature. This is how the spirit world works. We're going to tell you a little bit. We're going to tell you a little bit. We're going to start taking the veil over, right? Like the Wizard of Oz and this curtain. And then we're going to tell you more as time goes on. And they are. Leon Denis, after Allan Kardec, Chico Xavier, all sorts of spiritist mediums gives us more and more books. And that's what I do in my books is I go through and I try and accumulate this and tell you what the spirit world is trying to tell. And I try to make it so it's for different people learning different ways. Like my book, How to Live Inner Peace with Spiritism, is based upon a poem of 24 stanzas, I believe, and very short, you know, a couple words of Ana Luisa's, of I think it was called Inner Peace. And it's like a good blueprint of how to spiritually ascend, what the steps you should do. And I take each one, I say what it means and how you can achieve it. So that's one type of book. Now for those, and I know this is what is people, especially in English speaking words, and maybe every word, but I go through, oh, what happened? I go through and I really try to lay it all out. And I have books that go in deeper, like my Heaven and Below, Spirits and Spirit Universe, and how we're guided by spirits in deeper detail. But my book, The Spirit Realm, really is kind of puts all this together. What is the spirit realm? What's this logical concept? Are we a logical concept? We're still wonderful people. We're still unique personalities. We always will be. And the immortality of our existence, all of this, it just brings everything together, I'm hoping, as much as we know now. But I would recommend you read this one too. And that's in Kindle, paperback, and Audible format. So anyway, again, I will say thank you for everyone. Thank you for the questions. I really appreciate that. And so on Sundays, I'm going over more of a spiritist writing. On Mondays, I do a Q&A. And on Tuesdays, I'm doing other writings, which I know people love, like The Wanderer in Spirit Land. And I'll do another one, Through the Mist, after this one's done, where people who don't say they're spiritists, yet what they're revealing is very close to Spiritism. Anyway.